Welcome to the Curatorial Roundtable. I'm Steven Henry Madoff, the head of the Master's Program in Curatorial Practice at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And each week for the roundtable, I invite a distinguished curator or institutional director to speak about their practice. And today, I'm really happy to have Aline, and I'm going to read a short bio for Aline, and then hand things over to her just to say that she'll speak for about 50 minutes. And then you have the opportunity at the bottom of your screen in the Q&A to, type in a comment, a question for Aline. I'll read those aloud, and and that's it. So let me read this short bio and then turn things over to Aline. So Aline Hernández del Rosal is the artistic director of Casco Art Institute, working for the Commons in Utrecht, the Netherlands. She stepped into the role alongside Executive Director Marianna Takou in 2023, supporting Casco's continuity and recomposition through an ecosystem-centered approach. Aline's work spans arts organizing, creative writing, teaching, and research rooted in the pursuit of alternative economies of collectivity. Previously, she served as curatorial coordinator at the University Museum of Contemporary Art, MUAC, in Mexico from 2012 to 2015, where, among other shows, she curated the exhibitions Paula Weiss, The TV Sees You, and I Know Your Father Doesn't Understand My Molten Language, and co-organized Maria Teresa Alves, The Return of the Lake, and Harun Faraki, Vision, Production, Oppression. She's also held positions at the 9th European Biennial of Contemporary Art in Genk, Belgium, and at the Centro de la Imagen, or am I pronouncing that close?
Yeah.
In Mexico City. Her writings have appeared in museum catalogs and in journals such as Contemporary Theater Review, Parquet, The New Inquiry, and Das Superpaper. Aline has taught and lectured across Europe and is currently completing a PhD in the School of Art History at the University of St. Andrews. She's a member of the Translocal Ecosystems of Arts Collaboratory and Lumbung. And with that, welcome, Aline.
Thank you very much. It's strange not to see you all. Thank you for the invitation. First of all, thank you, Steven, for organizing this, and yeah, everyone that is part of the Curatorial Roundtable put an effort into this happening. I'm very happy to be here. It feels like these kind of invitations are always a space to reflect back on practice, on what we do and why we do it, I think, and also think back in time. So this is a very important opportunity for me to slow down and look back. So I'm happy to be here. Yeah, for today. So I always like to start with the structure, so you kind of know how I'm going to be moving around. I will begin. So Steven mentioned that I'm working currently at Casco, and Casco has been a very important part of my curatorial like formation or education, I guess, alongside experiments that have happened within and alongside Casco. So I'm going to be speaking about projects connected to Casco, but first I will start with a brief introduction to Casco, which seems important to do because we are a very yeah, unique or special arts organization. What we do, this focus on the commons. So it's also important to delve into that. And alongside that, I'm also going to be speaking about Arts Collaboratory. I'm going to explain a bit more about it. And then I'm going to be going into or zooming into some projects that we have done and that are very important. Yeah, for I guess for my curatorial practice. So yes, um, I guess the first question is about my curatorial practice. Um, so much of it has had to do with community, there's a very important notion that Casco has been developing over the course of the years, which is this idea of art organizing. Um, and art organizing and commoning, and that connects also with why we do things, how we do things. Um, so yes, my curatorial practice spans many years. I started working as a curator when I was in my early 20s, and I'm now 37 years old. So it's been a long time. I started in Mexico, where I was born, and it all started because I was getting bored in school. I was back in the time pursuing my MA and my BA, and I felt like there was a need to do things to get outside the books and to think along with other people and do things with other people. In my BA, we were mostly hearing about art history, so this was a humanities bachelor, and I really wanted to get hands-on with projects. So I started looking into what I could do, and one of the options became curating. So at the time, one of the first steps was just to figure out if I wanted to be a curator, who I wanted to learn from. This was very, very important to me because there's so many different ways of curating. There's so many ways of thinking about curatorial practice that really wanted to make sure that it made sense. And because I was young, that I got to learn from someone that inspired me and was thinking about ways of thinking about curatorial practice in a way that made sense to me. So I started working at the time with Cuauhtemoc Medina. He's a Mexican curator. He was the curatorial um, lead curator of MOAC. And I was working with him at MOAC. And it became very clear to me that there was something about his projects, like this research focus, this long-term research projects, this care for the people he was working with, and the ideas and the concept and what could become out of a curatorial project that really inspired me. So Cuauhtemoc became my side education, let's say, from school. I started working with him very, very early, and I went on for over 10 years. So that was very important for me. I moved alongside with Cuauhtemoc in different stages of his career. So my participation in the Biennale was also with him, and I was also working as an assistant, research assistant back when he was in the institute, and he's still there in UNAM, in the Institute of Aesthetics. And later he was appointed chief curator of MAC, and then I came with him there. So this start was very important for me because something that I learned with Cuauhtemoc was just taking time, which is something that sometimes in these days I feel like I lack. Just taking time to think about the projects, to work together with people, to move slowly through what we want to do together and what each curatorial project can become. This was very, very important. Mm, at at MUAC, I learned also to work with a very vibrant and closely knitted curatorial team, and also think about ways of instituting, like why are we doing the work that we're doing in case you decide to pursue a career working within an institution, because there's so many ways of creating. This meant a lot to me, just being part of this amazing team and working alongside so many women that were thinking and doing amazing projects and putting so much care into working with artists, and not only working with artists, but also bringing along communities that were part of these projects. So this was early start in my career. And at some point, I started to get more and more involved with the young art, like emerging art scene, whatever that means, back at the time in Mexico. And I came to be connected with a collective in Mexico for a number of initiatives in Mexico. And this is how my connection with Casco happens. So I was appointed recently, so some years ago, artistic director of Casco. But long before this, like back in 2012, I'm not too good with years, this relationship with Casco started to take place. And this happened specifically in connection to a network, which is Arts Collaboratory. So this, I would say, was my true master's program in thinking about what curating could mean. So I'm going to be moving around these experiences today, and starting with Casco, as I mentioned. I'm going to be putting up PowerPoints so you can see images, and I can also use it as a guide of sorts, which is good. So I don't lose track. So now 1 second. So yes, as Steven mentioned, I'm working at Casco Art Institute, working for the Commons. We are a medium-sized arts organization located in Casco, in Utrecht, in the Netherlands. We've been around for many years. So it was founded back in the 1990s. So that's more than 35. We turned 35 years recently. And across the years, Casco has been changing. So this is something that is also very important to me, this notion of an institute being able to turn itself around and change and evolve. And this process of evolving and changing has always had to do also with the communities that gather and organize around Casco. We are located in the Museum Cartier in Utrecht, and we are very, very lucky to have this amazing courtyard inside, like in front of the institute, where many of the activities take place. We are outside, guided by this very big tree. It's 180 years old. It's an old platanus tree, and we always say that this guides our practice. So it's kind of roots us in the place where we are. And the space is not so big. We share the space with another organization called Photodoc in Utrecht. This means that we have like 6 months of the exhibition space that Casco can use, and another 6 months, which is for Photodoc to use. And we have our gallery office space, where we organize a lot of events. So yes, as I mentioned, Casco has undergone many transitions over the years. Something that is very important and that we are very proud is that it has always been led by women. So we have had several directors across the years, all of them whom we remain close to. And the more recent transformation, which is the one that is relevant for the purpose of this talk, has started to take place, well, officially was announced in 2018. This was our transition into becoming an institution working for the Commons. Long before that, this transition started to happen like through projects, starting with, I would say, Grand Domestic Revolution, which was an amazing project created by our previous director, Bina Choi. This was kind of the first moment when the commons start to get to become a source of inspiration, and to become a source of inspiration in thinking about what an institution can be, and what ways of instituting we want to pursue. Um, I cannot go into detail into all of these projects. You are always welcome to reach out if you want to have more information. But just to say that the commons raised or brought a lot of questions to the team in thinking about um, how to institute and why we are pursuing a project of instituting. So what instituting can mean. And for Casco, during this process, it became very clear that there was this social vision that started to take a central role. And this social vision marked essentially, or brought a lot of questions about who we do want to organize with and what kind of projects we want to do. So it raised questions about the world we live in, uh, what ways we want to work as a team, as a team sustaining these processes. How do we want to organize? How do we want to be together? Also, what kind of habits need to change in this course of instituting? There are so many things that we often take for granted in thinking about instituting practices and thinking about curatorial practices, questions that kind of take more that remain in the background, I guess, because we are just driven by doing things and pursuing projects. So we stopped at a given moment asking things that we have inherited, ways of working, ways of organizing that we have inherited. So this project started to open a path or a trajectory for asking these questions and slowly started to shift direction into a long process of study around the commons. This happened through many programs, so it was not only like an internal process that the team or study process or trajectory that the team was pursuing, but it really felt that there was a need to do this with other people. So instituting is about who we institute with. We're doing projects, we're organizing, we're hosting events. So it only made sense that if we were going to rethink the whole institutional project, then it couldn't just be something that was done internally as a process of the team, but it needed to be opened up to other people. And alongside this, the questions that we had as an organization also needed to be kind of negotiated and thought through alongside other people. So in the course of the transition, since 2011, there were many projects happening in the course of which we started to study, or the team back then started to study the commons, started to go into deep processes, conversations with many partners who have become key and continue to be around us, two of which are Stefano Harni and Fred Moten, that have been so important for our whole trajectory as conversational partners, as partners in dialogue and allies in thinking about this. And I guess the question about something that became key was thinking, what do we understand about the commons? So the commons can mean many different things. Oftentimes, when we think about the commons, we think about resources. So air, the land, the everything that surrounds us and that sustains life. But there's this question also that comes with the commons, which is that there are no commons unless there's people governing them or organizing around them. So the commons need people to continue to live on and thrive. So this, alongside a process of also thinking together with a lot of feminist thinkers such as Silvia Federici, the commons started to shift, or an understanding of the commons started to arise for the team, which had to do more with relationships. So it's not necessarily about the resources, or in the case of Casco, we can think about an infrastructure. We have the space, we have a lot of resources, we have the library, we have the exhibition space, we have our archives, but it's more about relationships. So how can we bring this idea of relationships, sustaining relationships, caring for relationship, which is what we mean essentially with the ecosystem, with this notion of ecosystem, to the front side of the institution. So think about what, instead of thinking about projects, I guess it's more about thinking about the relationships and what each project brings in terms of relationships, and also what our work as arts organizers means in terms of this ecosystem. So maybe here I need to also clarify. When we think about ecosystem, when we deliberately have decided, I guess, to not go into or follow this notion of public. So instituting always means instituting for someone. And this idea of publics runs very close to arts organizations. So the publics we cater for or we organize projects for. But in the case of Casco, we have decided to instead bring this notion of ecosystem, because ecosystem refers to something that is alive, that keeps on evolving, that keeps on changing. We keep on growing as a team. We keep on growing with alongside each other, but we also keep on growing and thinking and rethinking alongside with all the people who remain close to Casco. So it can be artists, the workers, all the people that maintain and sustain us, all the people that come in their many different roles as photographers, cooking, etc. So this idea of ecosystem has become very, very important and is connected to the commons, because essentially how we understand the commons has to do with relationships. So everything we do is around these relationships. It's around these communities that we cater for, that we organize with, that we provide different kind of support, but that have also supported Casco in so many different ways across the years. As an institution, we have gone through many different processes. Sometimes there's more abundance of resources. Think of funding, for instance. Sometimes there's changes in cultural policy, and these communities or this ecosystem has really stayed close and has gives meaning to what we do. So in 2018, we announced the official transition. So we went from Casco office working for art, design, and theory, and this name change, Casco Art Institute working for the Commons, essentially marked a moment where the Commons became the center of our institutional practice and our practice of arts organizing. And since then, we have been following and thinking about what an institution working for the commons can mean, and what do we mean by this. And this has also shifted across the years. So it's not something that is stable how we understand the commons. We keep on making sense with others. Something that in this transition was very, very important, a process has to do with this project, which is on learning exercises, art organizations as sites for learning. It culminated in a publication that was recently re-edited. So we have it ran off. Sorry for my English. It went out of print, and now we have edited a second version. Um, and this project essentially was a long-term research practice or research into practice project that the Casco team developed in collaboration with artist Annette Kraus. So through this project, there was a deep questioning about all of these institutional habits that we have come at some point take it for granted. And it marked a moment of deep thinking in how we want to work together. So there were a lot of notions coming back in this study process. One of the key notions was this idea of busyness. So on learning to be busy and thinking about questions of productivity. So it's why we do what we do, what kind of rhythms we follow as a team, how we come to organize, how we come to work together. You can also think about the question of exhaustion. Many of us, sometimes across the years, like we come to be very tired. The art world can be very demanding, and it's oftentimes supported on these notions of hyper productivity, just going on and doing and doing and creating more projects, where essentially or eventually we lose the meaning of why we're doing what we're doing and with whom. So this was a very important process for Casco team in reorganizing the whole ways in which we work, and we do it together. The publication included several chapters which highlight like conversations. You can go into our webpage, and if you click on study, you will find the digital version of this. So it's tapped into different aspects of questions around working together. So there's meeting, there were experiments in trust, which is this chapter of balancing chairs. There was assembly, which has been a process very, very important for Casco. The assembly marks essentially a moment where we open up and discuss questions connected to the future of Casco alongside other members, and where we discuss important topics or themes. There was questions also around cleaning. As a team, cleaning has been very, very important. We clean together. We take a lot of care in thinking about the maintenance of Casco and the organization itself, like how do we maintain our space. There was also property relationships. I'm going to go back to that. And yeah, time diary, passion obstacle, why we do what we do. Again, I cannot go into each of these chapters, but you're very welcome to tap into it. And if you have any questions, I can come back to me. And something that in this process of rethinking art organization changed in fundamental ways how Casco thought itself has to do with membership to this network, which is Arts Collaboratory. So Arts Collaboratory is a network, a translocal network of arts organizations and initiatives. There's 25 arts organizations from across the world. So there's organizations in Latin America, there's organizations in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East. We only have organizations in Lebanon and in Palestine. And there's two members, Dune Foundation and Casco from the Netherlands. So membership to Arts Collaboratory became a very, very important process. At first, Arts Collaboratory started as a more conventional network. It was brought together through a call for participation, where all of these organizations or initiatives got to present projects and applied, and then they got selected. And Casco was called on in this process because of our whole work with working with the commons. So it ethos, there was a resonance there about this social focus on art, which marked this call and what Casco was doing. But in the course of Arts Collaboratory, as the members were selected, these organizations, there was a lot of thinking happening, which essentially eventually led the network to transform itself into a network that was brought these members in an unnatural way together. And through assemblies, the members started to rethink the network itself. So it evolved into a self-organized or self-governed member. So we have, here you can see this AC mutation. So we have the formative years, which go from 2007 to 2011, when these members or initiatives were brought together and started developing projects. Then through sharing, through assemblies, through collaborative projects, the network starts to rethink itself, rethink what is it that, why we were brought together and why we want to stay together. And then from 2014 and 2015, there was this idea of building towards a collective agenda. This collective agenda was marked very much by thinking about a funding paradigm shift. So when it comes to the art, well, funding is such key and essentially marks also what happens in the art world. So what projects are being funded, what curatorial projects are receiving funding, why they are receiving funding. And if you think about it, it also marks an agenda across the art world. So we started thinking about what is it that funding, about these funding structures that brought us together, but then in which ways can we rethink funding as well? So how can we shift relationships of power that mark funders with these initiatives? And how can we basically even have a conversation with funders in shifting how funding paradigms work? So this was a very special moment. It marked a moment where conversations with Dune essentially led Dune to transition from being a funder to becoming a member of the network itself. And alongside this, we started to rethink what is it that we want to move, like what what the network could become by thinking together and by doing together. Something about arts collaboratory that across the years has become very, very important is this notion of working together. So forming a community, working towards shared ideals, shared values, thinking about ethics together, and what kind of art projects we want to do and why we want to stay together and work together. So we have it here, like Arts Collaboratory Ecosystem has been experimenting and collaborating with new ways of being and doing, such as solidarity, collectivity, openness, and trust, and towards new ways of living that are closer to human and ecological needs and inclusive life. So this idea of solidarity and collectivity came to take a center stage within the network. And Casco itself also started to rethink itself as an organization through membership to the network. So what I mean by ways of working and sharing together, we have many things happening within the network. We have assemblies which happen once per year, and all of these members gathered together. We've come to be in many different places. The last one happened in the Netherlands. And it's a very important moment where all these members gather and we think about the future together. We have bangas, which are special meetings where different organizations can call on to other members because they are experiencing a problem or there are questions that are happening within the organization. So other people come together and think about these questions. We have collaborative projects and we have institutional residencies. Across these I don't know, like initiatives, something that is very important is that there's a lot of crossovers. So we move from one space to the other. We get to spend time in other people's organizations and see and hear about other ways of instituting, hear about other visions for art and arts organizing. And then the members come back to their own organizations. So essentially, through these crossovers, a lot of changes have been happening. Recently, this was captured very beautifully by a former member of Casco team and a curator, Jason Waite, which in the context of the assembly in the Netherlands, published an article called The Most Important Network of Art Institutions That You've Heard. And something that Jason captured was all of these movements around organizations. So the same way I was working or starting to work as a curator in Mexico, then I ended up in Casco, and how these transitions with other members as well. So we have the case of Marie-Hélène Pereira that also moved from RO and now is working at Jacabé. We also have Lumbung as a very important experiment happening in the context of Documenta 15, where many members came together to rethink the structure of an arts biennale. So across these crossovers, a lot of experiments have started to take shape, and also us moving to other institutions that don't necessarily hold connection to Arts Collaboratory or to this like main network. So this is just to say that I guess the whole process of Casco thinking itself is not only connection to the commons or picking up on a debate or a theme, which are the commons, but it's also just by being in exchange with each other and being in connection to other people and being in connection to institutional experiments and artistic experiments happening across the world. And many of these coming also from the global south. And being in the global south, also pressing questions about social justice come to the fore, about resources, about arts organizing in contexts where, yes, where the circumstances are more difficult or can be more challenging. So this is how I come to take part or to become a part of Casco through this participation in the network. And across the years, my participation has been through projects and through assemblies, taking taking different shapes, I guess. And through this, I've had the opportunity to learn about Casco, but also to be part of Casco's transformation, eventually leading into this change or being named artistic director. So 1 second, yes. So yes, what do we do at Casco? This is important. Yesterday, we were in this meeting for Lumbung in Sandburg in Amsterdam in the context of the master there that is being organized to think about how Lumbung continues. And there was this amazing poster coming from Lumbung Press. It's in Spanish, so I'm going to do a very bad translation. So it says, work with projects, not with individuals, no clients, but networks of accomplices. So looking at this project, because I was already thinking about this lecture, I was thinking about, yeah, I was still debating like how to explain my curatorial practice, and this essentially captured this idea. So something that I have developed or that is very, very important to my curatorial practice is this idea of working with networks of people. So we don't just pursue projects just for the sake of organizing a project or just because there's something that sparked my interest, but really many of the projects that are emerging through Casco, but through my own practice, have to do with these networks of this ecosystem that is organizing. So the ecosystem is alive, and the ecosystem comes with needs, comes with questions, comes with um, yeah, I guess open things that need to be solved or that haven't been solved. And many of the projects shape to this by being in relationship to the ecosystem. So it's not that we think of a program or that we think of an artistic program beforehand, but rather a lot of it is just always being shaped in conversation with. Um, and this takes me to the before I go into the projects to the transition. So in 2023 we announced a transition, and this is how I came to become artistic director of Casco. The transition happened again in the context of a project, so this was very beautiful. Bina Choi, our then director, was stepping down at the moment, and there were a lot of questions about who was going to follow Casco, so who was going to take the new role as artistic director. And alongside this came questions about how to continue with Casco as a project. So Casco has been an institution that has been cared for so many people across the years. It's deeply connected to Arts Collaboratory, to the work we do, also to Lumbung now as a continuing experiment of commoning. And as we started to think who could be taking on this role, it became very clear that it needed to come from inside the ecosystem. So it needed to be someone there that or people connected to this ecosystem that could steer Casco recomposition in an ecosystemic way. And why this is important is because we spend so much time in thinking about in working in these institutions. We spend so much time in developing institutional projects, in thinking about institutional practices with the ecosystem, and we spend so much time in nurturing these relationships that hold and that make the organization what it is, that it only made sense that it needed to come from the ecosystem itself, and so this recomposition could be steered in an ecosystemic way. So this also means that there was a lot of consideration about long-term projects that are happening in Casco and how these projects could also continue to take life. So a lot of the projects that are happening in the institution are not a one-year project that is presented as a curatorial project and then we move on to the next one. There's a lot of processes, long-term processes that take years and years in the making that are really key to Casco institutional practice. So then this we called, I forgot to add the slide, but this we called ecosystemic transition. So ecosystemic because it was coming from the ecosystem. So Mariana and me were both connected to Casco. I was coming from Mexico. Mariana was already part of the team. So then we came in alongside the Casco team members to steer this transition. And with that said, I'm going to be moving into some of the projects that we have done since this ecosystemic transition, also to try to explain more about Casco's practice and my own practice as a curator. So, starting with Nina Belev House Museum. This one was very important. It happened before the announcement, and essentially, at the time we were moving around these archives. So we have at Casco, wait, I'm gonna move. So you can see here, Casco's office is inhabited by these archives, and these are not conventional archives. So all of these boxes, what they carry inside are the histories of relationship of Casco. So inside of these boxes, you can find from projects that have taken place, curatorial projects, from the assemblies that have been happening in Casco, from artists that have had some kind of collaboration with Casco, smaller projects. There's also boxes that hold stories about relationships. So, for instance, here you have a Nuning. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we have long relationship with an institution in Indonesia with an organization called Kunci. So then Kunci has its own box. So all of these boxes hold the history of or the histories of Casco's relationship. So as we were thinking about the transition with Bina, we started going into these archives and thinking about how to bring them or open these archives to others. So Nina Belev was the name. Came to be, it's this attempt, I guess, of thinking about collectivity and going beyond authorship. So it started with unlearning exercises, but slowly it started to evolve. And I think depending on who you ask, Nina Belev will mean different things. The name takes inspiration, so it references important people that have been at the heart of Casco's thought. So we have, so the name conjures up the artistic Black feminist and political engagements, first with Nina Simon, then we have Bell Hooks and Silvia Federici. So as Nina continues to live on, starting from on learning exercises, the practices of many others were being called upon, keeping them, them as a collective figuration that brings all of these people together. So for the transition, or thinking about the transition, we decided to present Nina Belev House Museum. So this was a very interesting curatorial project. The the exhibition space was inhabited by a lot of by works and parts and bits of this archive. So it wasn't a conventional exhibition bringing works per se, but it was more about opening up these archives. As part of the curatorial process, we invited different people to respond to questions about Nina Belev, but also tell stories, personal stories about Casco and what Casco meant for them. So for the presentation, we had the upstairs space. We put all of these on learning exercises and diagrams, which have been very important for Casco. So thinking again about this whole process of becoming an institution working for the commons, these paths that you can see here are the same as the chapters in on learning exercises. And then in the gallery office, we had this table, and this table essentially marked a space where you can sit down and listen to these stories, these voice notes that were invited, different people were invited to contribute. But it was also a space where you can bring these boxes down and tap into these histories. So something here is also the questions to access to archives. So these archives are not something that remains inaccessible, but rather these are just boxes that you can bring down and dig into the archives. And oftentimes we have researchers coming to Casco, and then we sit down with them, and through these boxes, we can tell our histories of institutional trajectories. This was during the opening, so you can see us part of the team and other Casco ecosystem members. And this is the one that I thought I forgot, but I didn't. So in the context of after Nina Belev, the transition started to become more clear, and Nina became a very important project because this thinking ourselves in relation to, or thinking ourselves in an ecosystemic way, essentially like formed or took more clear form through this project. So with that, we announced in 2023 our ecosystemic shift. So we call it Everything Falls into Place. And this phrase comes from Dina, Marianna, and I thinking that for some reason everything was falling into place. I came from Mexico to the Netherlands, and we were all together thinking about these questions alongside also with the board. So this was the poster for our announcement, and this was during the opening of Nina Belev. So we have here also different members that have come to be connected to our cooperative ecosystem. In the context of this transition, we envision this committee which would become part of Casco. So it's not part of Casco team, but rather it's just a committee made of people that were in constant conversation thinking about the future of Casco. So you have Jasan Halili here, Bina Choi, who's also part of it, Annette Kraus here, Norayini Julia Stuti as well. Yeah, I think that's it. Then the announcement happens. And with the announcement, we start to think, so there's the first curatorial project. So there's a lot of questions about what this curatorial project could mean. The Netherlands Assembly of Arts Collaboratory had just happened. And something that's a question that arose for us in the context of the assembly because of the time when it happened was why are we doing what we're doing? Like, what is art to social justice? Why so many organizations came together at the moment, and then our members from Palestine couldn't be there. So then there was a lot of questions about why do we continue together? So, as I said, these assemblies marked a moment when we start to think about the future of Arts Collaboratory. So, given that Arts Collaboratory had played such an important role in the transition, with many members of the cooperative committee coming from Arts Collaboratory, and I myself being part of Arts Collaboratory, there was a question about making time and space after the assembly for thinking about how Arts Collaboratory could become more deeply embedded in Casco's long-term institutional practice. So it had already marked many of the transitions. So membership to the network had already sparked inspiration for thinking about the Casco and the many shapes that Casco has been taken over the years. But then at this point, there's the question about how do we want to move on and what do we want Arts Collaboratory to be. So with this, we envision our first official project happening after the transition was announced, which was called Hidden Arts. What do we do when no one sees us? The name is very important. We thought about how to signal or how to reference this idea that there's so much happening behind scenes. So there's this moment where you present the exhibition, when you make it public, and people get to see the result of a process. the result of conversations, the result of study, the result of dialogue. But there's so much happening in the background, and this has also been so important to Casco, so how to bring the background into the front side of the institution, that we wanted to follow a similar process. But it was difficult at the moment, or something we struggle with was how to bring this whole background or what happens when we are working in a project into the front side without it becoming overloaded with information or overloaded in a way that people struggle to make sense about. So then we thought that maybe a solution for this was that through this exhibition, we wanted to instead give a space, like a platform for for people, initiatives, and artists that we have been working with, artists that were connected to questions we were asking, to give the exhibition space for them to take over the exhibition space. So then people could come in and instead of seeing a finished project, rather see them in action. So see them as they were coming together, as they were doing things, but also get to see a glimpse of things that we were thinking at the time. So um, yes, here you can see Hidden Arts, What Do We Make When No One Sees Us was a group exhibition. Uh, at the heart was this exploration of alternative economies of collectivity, shared resource building, and arts organizing. So the exhibition was closely tied to this recent organizational shift at Casco, which brought together a small, newly assembled team of long-term collaborators to steer this recomposition. So the exhibition was conceived indeed as a dedicated time and space to celebrate, reflect on, and exchange around translocal models of cooperation, collaboration, and solidarity in the arts. So we brought together, it was not only about arts collaboratory, something that we have is also a long genealogy. So Lumbung as an experiment is also in turn connected to arts collaboratory, where many of the members of Lumbung, including Ruan Grupa, were part of. And then this in turn is connected to a former experiment which is BRAIN, which started to develop in the context of Rijksacademy, where many of these members, including Ruan Grupa, came together. So then they were thinking about south to north relationships. So we wanted to make space to bring these long genealogies of experimental forms of arts organizing to the front, and then think also together with other members. So there was Lumbung Kiosk, which became very important, and I will speak about this in a moment. And then there was Mutual Support Platform, MSP, which is a platform developed for thinking about questions of solidarity in the School of Fine Arts here in Utrecht. So it's MAFA Takou. So upstairs in the exhibition space, we had several projects. We had first what we call the archive room, where we displayed a lot of harvest. So harvest is a way of documenting from a very personal or subjective standpoint. So processes. So these harvests were connected to Arts Collaboratory, but were also connected to Lumbung, to questions that have been happening around ways of organizing collectivity, of building shared resources and shared modes of production. So we brought outside from the archive all of these harvests, and we made space also to study these harvests with the people that were coming in the exhibition. Then the other room was, at the time, something that was important was questions about economy. Economy and arts economy. So thinking about how can we recover or create spaces to recover our capacity to understand that the economy, it's us that make the economy. So the economy is not something happening outside the arts economy, outside us, but rather we are making the economy through our own practices. So here we have you cannot, it's not very clear, but we had this shop-like structure that came from this practitioner, Daeun Lim. So she was essentially made all of these mobiles and they were being sold. So it was like a small shop within the exhibition space that was set up in thinking also how to use the exhibition space or what the exhibition space how can it be used to prompt alternative economies of collectivity. Alongside, we had this fanzine put on display in the wall by this practitioner and feral trader Kate Rich, which was thinking about ways of being in exchange with each other. And we had this harvest from Display, Distribute, and Krista Jantowski, which was thinking about shop-like structures as structures of sociality. Then the other spaces, the remaining exhibition spaces, were given to MSP. And then MSP in turn brought or invited, extended the invitation to students from HKU. So the whole exhibition, these two rooms, were open for the students to just take over. We were guiding them in the process, of course, so it was not just that they would come in, but it was more the question or the invitation to them was thinking about how can we make an exhibition space a live space. So not something that just presents works and then these finished works where the public comes in to see, but rather how can we make it a space for gathering, a space to be with each other, a space to ask questions. These students were coming from the master, so then they are still thinking about what kind of practice they want to pursue. So it felt very important to open up this space, so connect back the past, Casco becoming connected to Arts Collaboratory, to Lumbung, to all of these experiments, and then extend this invitation to them to think themselves in relationship to these experiments. So then together with them, they developed all of these different presentations. They were shifting across the weeks. At a moment, there was a bar being set up inside the exhibition space. Then they also presented their projects, and then they made space for study. The study part was very important because each of them, every time they graduate, they present a thesis, and this thesis is often just left behind, and then they move on to being artists. So then it felt important to bring all of this long-term work and thinking and research work that they have done to the exhibition space itself. And with this exhibition, we were also happy to present or to inaugurate Casco's Kiosk. So Casco's Kiosk is a shop that was set up. It's a very small shop. It's a corridor almost, set on the side of our office gallery. And at the time with the transition happened, Documenta had also finished, come to an end, Documenta 15. And there were a lot of remaining questions about how to continue. And you might know about this, but Documenta, like Lumbung, was structured around many working groups. So one of these working groups was Lumbung Kiosk. And Lumbung Kiosk came to be imagined as a network of decentralized, self-run kiosks aimed at selling products at various locations, one of which was Documenta, of course. So its mission was to establish a sustainable model for gathering income through the sale of goods produced by Lumbung members, artists, and their local ecosystems. So it was inspired by Feral Trade Model Pioneer by Kate Rich, which explores a slow trade mechanism that encourages collective practice, decentralized distribution, and those into alternative economies. So it's through direct exchange, Lumbung Kiosk facilitates resource sharing and encourages social interactions across its mobility network. Essentially, the kiosk means that it's not so much about selling the products or what we come to produce, but it's rather about how we come to be in connection with each other. So feral trade is a way in which these products travel from location to location through exchanges, through meeting other people. And when Documenta came to an end, all of these products were brought together to Kassel through all of these travels that happened in the context of Documenta. And then we ended up with this stock. And there was a question of what to do with the stock. It was not only about the stock, however, but essentially, Lumun Kiosk was also marking an economic experiment. So it was a place to produce things together and to kind of build a small economy for collectivity. So with this, we decided that one of the curatorial, I mean, you can call it curatorial projects, was to start to experiment with the notion of a market and the notion of a market and the notion of a shop. I bring it in connection to the previous exhibition because if you see it here, so there's this small harvest, which is not very clear, but you can see it here. So this small harvest, this harvest now was done by Christian Display Distribute, and it was, yeah, the heart of it was thinking about how can we rethink shop-like structures as structures of sociality. So it's not about selling, but it's rather thinking of a shop as a place where people come together, they meet. And Casco, when we thought about bringing the kiosk into Casco and opening a shop, we also thought that it might be a good opportunity or a good space for other people from our local ecosystem to be able to come and then come into contact with these practices through small objects, through books, through stickers, through t-shirts, through a very vast range of merch and product, and get to know initiatives that are happening across the world. So it's not so much a project in itself, like you come and see the exhibition space, you see a project, but it's rather these small objects that can tell the history of a whole initiative.
Mm.
So it was very important for us. And since we opened the kiosk, we have done a lot of market experiments. And these market experiments have been very important because we open up to the public. So by just doing an accessible publicity, it's either Christmas market, it's spring market, just you have a very vast, broad public coming into the space and getting to know these initiatives, which they would not have otherwise get to know. Stephen, I am running
Yes.
for time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you want to make some last remark before we go to questions, or how would you
Um,
like to do it?
no, um, yes, I think, yeah, for last remarks, I think that something that is just very important that is at the heart of all of these projects is just thinking of ways to connect and thinking of ways to bring the ecosystem and support the ecosystem. So this has been really at the heart of Casco over the years, and this has also been at the heart of the new stage of Casco. So yes, I think with that I can finish, and then we can open up to questions.
Great. All right. So thank you for the presentation. And there are quite a number of questions. So the first is, I'm trying to understand how Casco interfaces with the art institution. How can the ecosystem be inside and outside the institution? Who shows up? Is this really a commons?
Okay. Okay, how interfaces? So, um, this brings me back to public programs. Something that is very important to Casco, and I was going to tackle this in the next part, but then I couldn't go into that. Um, we have, we keep a big emphasis on making a lot of space for public programs to happen. So there's, on the one hand, this work we do in hosting programs. So a lot of members just come in and propose projects, they propose screenings, they propose events, and we not only host them, but we also, in many cases, work together to further develop them. So this is one way in which they come. We also have a number of initiatives that take place outside Casco. So in this project that I was going to talk about, this is one example. So we are trying to blur this inside and outside the institution. So there's a lot of things happening outside where there's tours within Utrecht, but also tours happening or events happening inside other places in the Netherlands, working with initiatives that are already present, so going and visit them. So this is one way. We have Traveling Farm Museum also, which marked an experiment in trying to reshape or trying to make a space outside Casco in the form of a farm in the outskirts of Utrecht in Leidse. So there's the exhibitions themselves as well. They are all animated by a very lively program. So it's not only exhibitions as coming to see something, but always coming to see something in connection or in conversation with. So this is, I don't know if this is answering the question, but there's a lot of exchange happening through programs, and there's also a lot of support given. So students coming for long sessions to Casco just to speak about instituting practices. So it's essentially meeting points. The question is how to create as many meeting points, as many points of exchange and of gathering that we can, as opposed to just presenting finished exhibition projects or just finished projects in general. I hope this answered the question.
Okay. Next from Gia Del Pino. Wonderful presentation. Can you please elaborate how you think and engage in conversations about ethics in an ecosystemic way? Ethics, whether that be curatorial, about funding, about collaboration, etc.
Yes, this is a very long answer. Um, so, with this question actually came back with a group of students recently with this project, um, Arden in the Polder, so rerouting in the Polder. And why it came? Because Babke Fenstra, this artist that started or initiated this project, brought in turn a very big group of people into the exhibition. And many of the works were developed in collaboration with farmers, with people from different places. So I have it here. So it was the projects were embedded in suburban spaces in Utrecht, Leidse, Hersulens, and then also in this other polder near Leiden. So by working together with other people and these people being featured in the works, the question of ethics comes back. Something that I explain at the students, and I think I'm sharing it now because it really felt a good way of speaking about this, is that we are many of the artists are not just working with people or featuring people in the works. It's always about working with others. So in this case, Babke herself open up this research project, and this research project involved farmers, involved people working in these farm sites, in these different sites, and she remains in conversation with them. So she was not coming in with her own questions, but rather she started the project by listening to the people that were in these sites and listening to the questions that they had. And together they developed the project in answering or finding possible answers to these questions. So by this I mean that the projects are done always in collaboration. So then questions around the ethics of the project, the ethics of collaboration are always negotiated as we start to as these collaborations start to take place. At the level of the institution, we are always very clear. So we move in the Netherlands. We have standards for wage, which is very very important, and so we are always very clear about like you have standards of how much you need to pay to an artist. However, besides that, and we follow these guidelines, of course, as an organization, but besides that, we are also always very open and transparent about our budgets. So every time we engage with a project, every time we start something, there's conversations around the project, there's conversations also around the budget. So how are we going to distribute the budget? What goes where, for whom? There's not only questions about the artist, but there's also conversations about who needs to be paid what. The photographer that comes in, the people who are doing harvesting, the people who are cooking. So all of these conversations are not only happening within Casco team, but are also the artists themselves is also being invited. And this is very important because we need to start thinking about what it means to make an exhibition where it's not only about the artist, but it's a big ecosystem of people coming together and making this exhibition happen. From the person that is cleaning the exhibition space to the person that is documenting, to the artist that is showing the works, to the collaborators who are coming together. So this we try to always make it clear. And for the institution, we are very also open about how we are organizing. So we oftentimes host long sessions with students from across programs, from artists to art history to social sciences. And then they come for 2 hour, 3 hour sessions. And we are very keen on also opening up about the struggles of organizing together, of working as a commons, the struggles we face as a team, struggles we also face for sustaining an ecosystem, of sometimes also being overworked. So I hope this answered more or less.
Okay, next, which is really a follow-on within the Casco system. Have you experienced conflict and how do you address it?
Um, yes, so we don't shy away from conflict. Oftentimes you see now, I always laugh when I see this notion of safe space. I don't know if a safe space is possible. I think at the level of like how we think about it in Casco is that um, conflict comes. Of course, when you have people organizing, when you have people working together, when you have also such close relationships, we have people coming to the space all the time, artists, students being around, conflict arises. So it's more a matter of how to deal with it. And I cannot give you a recipe for this. This is always dealt on a case-to-case basis. But we do certainly put a lot of attention and energy in working through processes. At the end, something that is also very special, oftentimes at the end of not oftentimes, at the end of these projects, there's always also space to reflect back, where artists and collaborators can also express what didn't work, what worked well, what they would have changed. So then we just make sure, I guess, when navigating conflict, it's not so much about just answering or having the capacity to answer when conflict comes, but it's also just allowing for a lot of spaces to speak about how we experience things. So then conflict is dealt in a more generous and careful way. It's not, um, yeah, I guess there's always an open conversation. There's always space for conversation. And we are always open as a team to to change and to understand how we can do things better, how we can understand, and also conflict within the groups that we host. So we have been just working through that and working through that on a case-to-case basis.
Okay, next. So Brindusa Burrows says, my name is Brindusa Burrows, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist working with how we see ourselves as humans in relationship with trees as an inquiry into living identities. What place does nature have in your vision of the commons, and how do you work under the overall umbrella of the commons to explore various thematics?
Um, yes, ecological unlearning has been very important. Um, we are, after all, talking, it's not only about the ways of working together, but also the world we live in. And the world we live in is a vast ecosystem made of so many uh, presences and yeah, roles, like everyone takes different roles. So ecological on learning and thinking about questions of ecology have become key. We keep on addressing this or opening space for study through different projects. This is how we have been learning to do it. So we had, for instance, assemblies tackling climate crisis, where a lot of people came together. It was called our house is on fire. You can go into our website and look for it. We also develop climate justice code, which stems from one of these assemblies. And the climate justice code essentially was coming out of this working group that formed in the context of the assembly and is thinking about questions of climate justice and what is the role of arts organizations within this. So it's not just saying we are being sustainable, we are not we are lowering our emissions, we are taking this and this solution, but it's rather thinking about structurally thinking ourselves structurally within this climate crisis and an invitation for other institutions to do this. Again, if you go into our webpage, if you go into this study section in the tab in Casco's webpage, you can find the code and it's available online. You can read it. And if you cannot find it, you can reach out. My contact is also on the webpage in Casco, so you can always reach out. And then projects like this one with Babke, but I also spoke about Traveling Farm Museum, where we can come with different people and think about like continue a long-term study process. So these projects that we continue to develop around ecological unlearning are always in conversation with each other. So it's not that one project ends and one project then comes the next one, but rather we try to weave together all of these projects as to make a long-term research and thinking trajectory where many people can come in, from the artists, but also the collaborators, people participating in the program, etc. I hope this answers.
And last, not a question, although I guess we could make it one. Mike has said, it seems to me that the arts need to become more radicalized to combat the movement of authoritarianism around the world. And I guess in a way, what you've been talking about is that the structure itself of Casco and its collaboratory project is a way to sidestep the issues of authoritarianism or address them. What do you say about that?
Yes, yesterday I was having a conversation about this because I mentioned that we were gathering with Lumbung, and we were thinking about, I mean, what happened. And I was saying that, like, yeah, we were in conversation thinking that basically what we faced back then is connected to new forms of fascism that are taking shape all over the world. So no one is free from them. And the degree or the levels of violence to which they manifest themselves, like necropolitics, changes, of course, depending on your geography and position. But something that Casco has been, that it became very clear for Casco was also because of our relationship with arts collaboratories. So being in such close relationship with the Global South, and also thinking of the Netherlands in relation to the Global South, because there's no separation. There is questions of coloniality, ongoing questions of coloniality, which we need to tackle. And for Casco or within Casco, we understand that this needs to be done with others. We cannot do it alone. We cannot do it as an institution alone. As an institution, we work with other institutions. As an institution, we work with many other artists. Artists depend on us, but we depend on them as well. So it's how we do it together. And the commons framework, as a framework of relationships, moves in this direction. So we're not trying to, when we think about our instituting experiment, the purpose is for it to extend beyond Casco. And we've seen it as well, like in different experiments happening across the world in instituting. And I guess this needs to spread further. So as also like future curators or already practicing curators, something that we ask often when we have, like in the Apple with the Apple Curatorial program as well, like you are stepping into you're the future in a way. You are the ones that now get to ask questions about what you want to do, how you want to do it. And it's very important as well to ask questions about what organizations you want to be in relationship with, what institutions. You get to ask questions about not only just doing or presenting a project, but rather what is the politics of the institution? What is happening in the background? What are people experiencing? Like all of these questions, we need to start asking as practitioners. We need to start asking who we are in relation with. What kind of artists? What are their ethics? What are their politics? And this is also how a movement is produced. Because the commons is not about scale. The commons is about many experiments unfolding simultaneously. So then we need more and more. And this happens through practitioners. This happens through everyone that is practicing arts organizing. So this is just a very small instance, which we hope can continue to be replicated.
Okay, well, that's it for questions. So thank you. Um,
Thank you.
very, I wish we could have gone longer with
Yeah,
the public. Obviously, there's more, but we'll switch now to the session with the students. So thanks to
yeah.
the public for joining us. Thanks, Aline, and see you in a minute on the other link.
Thank you so much.